In the heart of the forest, legends awaken from the shadows. The tales of Sasquatch echo through time, a mystery that remains unsolved.
As the smoke clears, the sign stands resolute, a beacon of intrigue. What secrets lie within the forest's depths? The quest for truth begins at Sasquatch Watch Radio. Here's Billy Willard and Gary Kendrick.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is February 24th, 2025. We've got a wonderful show for you tonight. We've got a retired U.S. Navy SEAL on the show tonight, Mr. Daniel Toth of Big, and we'll get him in here in just a moment. But until then, let's get our other host in here. How are you doing tonight, Gary?
Hey, Billy, how is everybody tonight?
Everybody's good as far as I know. You look like you're good.
Yeah, finally. The weather's kind of stabilized for a minute. Of course, now I've got about 4 inches of mud all over my yard.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to the stick cleanup because I got sticks all over my yard.
Oh, so. Yeah. It's been wild.
Well, yep. Now, without further ado, we want to get our guest in here because I think we're going to have a great show tonight. I think we might even go a little over time because there's a lot to get to on this.
Yeah, boy.
So, without further ado, we want to welcome Dan Toth to the show. How are you, Dan?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's an honor to have you on, and just want to. This is definitely your first podcast show, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as far as my research and everything I've done, and developing, putting Big together in the last couple of years. Yep.
Very good. Well,
yep.
You've already met my host there, Gary.
Yep.
So he's got your questions ready for you. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Will do. Thank you.
I'm going to try to say this right. Toth, Daniel Toth.
Yeah, Toth. Yep.
Toth.
Yep.
U.S. Navy SEAL, retired, founder and CEO of Big, which is Bigfoot Investigative Group.
Yep.
It's comprised of mostly retired military, mostly Navy SEAls.
Yes.
And I did notice, and this is really strange, because I'm a United States Marine.
Right.
And most people refer to us as crayon eaters. Marines are not the smartest bunch you've ever run into. But your IT man is a retired Marine.
There you go. Well, I worked at Warcom staff N66 from 2014 to 22. And one of our guys was a retired Marine, and he was literally one of the most phenomenal computer IT gurus I've ever met. And he's actually a member now, volunteer member of our staff. So, it's you get an MOS, take it and run with it. That's the way I always look at it.
Yes, sir.
And you get, in the military, you learn stuff. And I learned a long time ago when I went through SEAL training, and even when I was in the fleet for a year, when you pick something to do in the military, you just inherently get good at it. The training's there, the experience, you got good people around you that, guide you and mentor you and teach you and train you, pass that on. So it's a good thing. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No problem.
And I know a lot of veterans, I'm going to speak for veterans here, and I probably shouldn't speak for an entire group, but I'm going to, because I'm not a good representative of any single group. But
right.
That's something once you get out of the military, and I don't care if you did, 2 years, which I think is minimum enlistment for the U.S. Army, or whether you did 25 years in the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force,
right.
The Army, whatever you did your time in. You missed that camaraderie that you had. Yeah. The group dynamic is not the same in the civilian world.
No,
and that's something that you end up missing.
Yeah, I agree. And I've met a lot of people that in my life, over the years and through time, even now, where, I've had a few people look at me and go, oh, I was only in for 2 years, or I was only in for 4 years, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're still a veteran. You signed up, you enlisted, and you served. And the big thing I learned real quick when I was young, going through buds, is that was back in 1976. Well, but there's nothing out there any of us do on our own. I mean, we needed boats, we needed food, we needed logistical support, we needed comm support. We needed a helo to insert. We needed a C-130, to insert with a, static line combat equipment jump, whatever the case might be. And, it didn't take me long, really, when I was younger, and I did all that for those years. I really appreciated, the people in the other branches of the military, from the Air Force to the Coast Guard that we worked with, because, it's not like I might be a SEAL, but I'm not getting in a phone booth, putting on a red and a blue suit with a cape, going
I
up
don't know if
and
you heard
away.
about last week's comment that I made, but I'm going to go ahead and break it down to you now. Somebody said, Billy was talking about we're going to have retired Navy SEAL on the show. And I said, you know why we have SEALs? No, why do we have SEALs? And I said, because not everybody can be a Marine.
Yeah, there's nothing better than those loving, give me a hug, inter-service rivalries. That's for sure. And the cliches that go along with them.
Yeah,
I know I've heard something in my life when I was on active duty, or I was like sitting there going, yikes.
We talked about this off air, and Daniel go along with it. In every unit, you have somebody that's Rambo, and I said, this is the guy that will fight a tank naked with a bayonet.
Yeah.
I always have somebody that's like BJ Honeycutt, or not BJ Honeycutt, but Hawkeye. That's the comedian. Yeah. That was kind of the role that I filled, and you said that was kind of the role that you filled. And if you can make somebody, if it's a bad time, dude, and I mean, we've had some bad times. If you make somebody's life, you make your day a little bit better and their day a little bit better. So
I mean, the I guess you could call it. I refer to it as the comedic relief. It's always good for your attitude and your mental hygiene in the long run. I mean, I what do you call it? I clung to that real fast, like when I went through Hell Week, in SEAL training, which tons of guys have done now over the years. But when you're doing stuff like that, and I don't care where you're at, you might be EOD school, scout sniper, ranger, jump school. There's people that I look at it like I learned, being honest with you, that people are given their God-given abilities, and you really see that more so than ever in the military. When you see people get good at this and good at that, but when you look at it all in the long run and you're working together as what I call a fine-tuned, well-oiled, functioning machine, you kind of really appreciate that. And you look at the people next to you, and most guys in the military will, vouch for this. You look at one another and you go, hey, I've got your six, and they've got your six.
Yeah.
Because, there's been times since I retired where I've done some stuff on my own like this. I've been sitting out there in the middle of the woods at, midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, by myself. I mean, I don't care. I'm not afraid of anything except God and lightning, being blunt about it. But, you kind of sit there and, it's kind of, sometimes my mind has gone back thinking, man, I remember how I used to feel doing this stuff in the teams when you had, your 12 or 6 guys in your squad around you from your platoon or your squad. It was a whole different, what do you call it, puppy. So, but it's a good thing to look back on and reflect on. And also for most people in the military, men and women alike, you cannot help but have good memories of that camaraderie, after you retire and you get out and move on, because it stays with you the rest of your life. And you remember those people too. And I do. I mean, some of them aren't with us anymore already, but it's a good thing to look back on and reflect on. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Daniel, let's get into some Bigfoot stuff here. You are the founder and CEO of Big.
Yep.
Tell us about your Bigfoot investigative group and what got you started into Sasquatch.
Well, like a lot of, I've done a lot of research and followed this thing, if you will, from the sidelines for decades since I was a boy. Where I grew up at in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I'm going to tell you this story. It's great. Where the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel comes in on Shore Drive in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is not too far from I guess it's Gate 5 at Little Creek,
Yes, sir.
amphibious base, where the teams are on the East Coast. Well, I had a paper route down there at Chicks Beach in that area, down by the Bay Bridge Tunnel, Lake Joyce, and all that area when I was a kid. Met a lot of team guys on my paper route, and they inspired me to, become a SEAL. They actually trained me. But right where the Bay Bridge Tunnel intersects Shore Drive, years ago, a drive-in movie theater used to sit there. It was called the Shore Drive-In. And we used to actually go up when I was a teenager, and we'd hide our bikes in the ditch and go across the highway and sit in the bushes at night, and we'd watch the movies, from there on the overpass. And one night, a whole bunch of us went up there. There was like 8 of us. And they had this movie on called The Legend of Boggy Creek. And we watched that thing, and I was sitting there like, I don't know how old I was. I think I was 14 or 15 maybe. But but I'd seen the video also before that movie of the Patterson-Gimlin film. Was that I saw that on In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And those two things combined, and I've read that a lot of people have said this and stated it, but that really got my curiosity going. And in the area, where I lived and grew up at and hunted and canoed and fished, Blackwater, Dismal Swamp, Stumpy Lake, Currituck Sound, all those areas, those two things really, especially seeing Patty walking, like she did in that video, or the film clip, excuse me, at Willow Creek. That's what inspired me and got me going. And then I actually said to myself, I thought, once, I'm not going to be able to do it now, but once I retire years from now and I'm done, serving my country, doing my thing, which I did, I figured I'd get into it professionally and, pursue it as a full-time, thing. And that's what I've done in the last 2 years. So I'd say Patty at Willow Creek, and like a lot of other people, watching the movie, watching the Boggy Creek. That's what got me going.
That's the two things that nailed me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially
you gotta give Leonard Nimoy credit. He's probably got more people into Bigfoot than any other single. That and Boggy Creek has probably inspired more researchers than anything else.
Right. And plus, when you look back on people in our age, in our time, because there's a little bit of gaps, I call it, between cultural stuff now that we're getting to this point in our life a little bit. But Leonard Nimoy In Search Of, that was a phenomenal show.
It was.
It was. I almost looked at it like it was a little bit ahead of its time in a way.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah. I think those are the two big things. And plus, to be honest with you, guys I served with, they always said I was a little bit eccentric. I didn't care, but it was a compliment to me. But I thought, I've always had I've always had a curiosity and a fetish for the unknown. And I was also convinced, even when I was a SEAL, I talked to people about stuff, that they said they'd seen or whatever. And I thought, if they're seeing it and you're hearing it from enough people, there's got to be a logical or a tangible or a legitimate explanation, to it. And the only way to get to the bottom of it is to get out there and, start cranking and investigate it. I mean, if we do good enough here, maybe we can start filming the sequel to the X-Files. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Scully and Mulder.
We'll take over for Chris Carter. Say, we got it from here, Chris.
Yeah. I was a huge fan of the X-Files.
Me too.
Well, there's got to be, if people are seeing stuff, there's got to be an explanation for it, and you got to get to the bottom of it, and it takes work and research and getting out there, like a lot of people are doing. there's a lot of people out there, hitting it hard, trying to, what do you call it, get to the bottom of this enigma
Mhm.
of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or either, my main goal is, and I'm going to say it point blank as a SEAL, my main goal is to actually meet one and hopefully establish some type of rapport with it and interact with it and get some really good, tangible, legitimate, video or pictures, or I joke and say, even if it's, me and him sitting on a stump having a Starbucks and some Twinkies. He's gotta get, I think we gotta get some kind of legitimate, really hard line. I mean, like, I talk to Dr. Jeff Meldrum occasionally, and, we consult, and he had mentioned once that maybe, one of the things that's going to actually solve this whole thing in the long run is maybe to get the remains of one, which, because I don't really want to see that. I mean, I know everything dies, but, if you could find one and get a cadaver, I think that would blow, but that's where I stand right now. So, yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's going to take a body. I think we
Yeah.
talked about this last week on the show too.
Yeah.
I think every group needs to have some type of, almost like
Protocol.
an SOP protocol, standard
Yeah.
operating procedures for
Yep.
what happens if you find a body, or if, God forbid, somebody's had to kill one. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
That, okay, we're going to do this. This person's going to have this. This person's going to have that. We're going to notify
Right.
these people. And I'm kind of a big conspiracy theorist too, and I honestly believe that if you was to have a body, that the government would probably come in and take it. So
I really, I've heard so many stories, and I've heard hearsay, and, I've heard rumors, but on that note, I really don't know anything on those lines, and I don't know if that would really transpire. But with the way things are in this day and age, it's like they say, I wouldn't put it past them, because I've heard some stories in my life of the, because like I said, I've been looking into this, for decades, and I made the decision to do it professionally, and which I'm doing now. And I've heard so many stories, and some of them, there've been a lot of people that I heard stories from that were former military, including the guy that works for us now in California, Steve Powell. He had an incident occur when he was in the Army years ago, when he was out on maneuvers, as they call it, at Fort Bliss. And, and you hear stuff like that from former military people who are trained the way we are to be, situational awareness and, know your environment, been out in the woods at night, looking at aircraft, stuff in the sky. I mean, like when I had the Bobcat Pass incident occur, which we can talk about later, in New Mexico in October the year before last. I mean, I'm going to tell it straight up, as a SEAL, when I heard that thing, what I call do those 3 night screams, because I've heard Bobcat, mountain lion. I've never heard anything like that in my life, the sound that thing made that night. Then I ended up getting it on video from about, I don't know, 100 and something plus yards away. But, the bottom line is that when military people are telling you stories about stuff, like there was a story I read on BFRO a while back about 4 Marines in a gulch, or in a gully, on maneuvers at Camp Pendleton, California, back in the 60s, I think it was. And they claimed up and down that one walked up on them while they were sitting there in their, rally point in this gully or ditch, and they saw it. And they were like, what the, and they swore up and down. So, I mean, on those lines, I look at that like, I've talked to Dr. Meldrum about this, about how they can migrate and move, solo, and maybe they're going from point A to point B. And it could have been a situation like that, where that lone incident that night that transpired at Camp Pendleton could have been, maybe it was a Sasquatch moving, going somewhere, I don't know. But there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of pros and cons and the ins and outs and the way you can look at this stuff like a lot of other enigmas. And, the best way to do it is, I think, it's going to take a body or someone up close and personal, getting some really clear, good video or pictures of it.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. So anyway, next.
And, tell us about your group dynamic. What's it like working with these Navy SEALs and retired Marines and going out and actually recovering evidence and doing the things that you guys do?
Well, it's good because, the guys that are part of BIG, we work together. Matter of fact, one of the guys, our vice president, Mike McMahon, we served and we deployed together at SEAL Team 3 years ago, in the 80s and the 90s. So, just on I'm just an explanatory note, if you will, working with guys that you served with that are SEALs, that know, what you're doing, how you think, how you're wired, how you're trained. It's really good.
Excellent.
It leads to a lot of good cohesiveness in the field when we do it, because me and Mike have been out a couple times. The other guys haven't because, they're back east. When I talk to them, they provide a lot of input, like Mass Chief Billy Hill, he's in Texas, retired. He provides, some information occasionally. So does Pat. We got Pat down here in Denver. He's a Marine I told you about. I worked with at Warcom Sompi for a few years. So, it's good. It keeps the ball rolling and everybody knows what to expect from one another. And plus everybody knows what I expect, being blunt about it. Because my high end approach to this whole thing is, come hell or high water, Lord willing, I hope to find one and actually get up close and personal with one, because I've always had a thing with animals. I'm just, I don't mean to get off, but I have a thing with animals. I've interacted with a lot of wild animals in my life where they've come up to me. I've done what I did since I was a kid. I just sit there and be still. And I'm talking about anything from black bears to a mountain lion to moose, deer. I mean, my AO last year out in the Clark, Hans Peak, Columbine area, Colorado, I got so used to so many animals. It was crazy. They were coming up to me in the dark stuff. It was crazy. So, working together, we know one another. We've done this stuff before and we know how we're approaching it and doing it, like SEALs would. That's just plain and simple. So it's a good thing. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to hop on this. Mick has commented and said Camp Pendleton, there's some reports of Sasquatch encounters there. I'm going to get into that a little bit later on in the show, Mick, if you can hang on.
Yeah.
Let's see, Dan, what are the tools you use in your investigations?
What are the tools?
Yes. What equipment do you carry?
Oh, sheesh, a lot. I got ATN thermal night imaging device, binoculars. I've got a couple Leopold night vision. I don't use trail cameras that much because I'm personally convinced that they're really not that effective because, I don't know, I want to be there when it happens. I use binoculars and stuff like that. But mostly the piece of equipment I use primarily, for me personally, I haven't been a SEAL. I use a ATN night thermal imaging device. And because I work at night, because a lot of people, I don't know if they're aware of it, but a lot of mammals, or most mammals, are actually nocturnal. And that's one of their traits, and the thing is, when you're out in the daytime, it's really hard to spot something in the daylight and the light, with the shadows, the foliage, the vegetation. When it's dark, especially on a low lit, almost moonless night, you're getting a good signature in that ATN device. You can go through 4 spectrums on it of white hot, black hot, red hot, or fusion. And that's what I do when I see something. I get in on it as fast as I can. And then there's been a lot of times where I thought, no, that's a moose. that's an elk. And, and I've even, like down in New Mexico one night, it was really cool. I was near the pump house at the Chevron mine between Custer and Red River, where one of our informants or, witnesses had told me that he'd had these encounters when he worked as a security guard for the Chevron mine. I had a lobo wolf. It was a lobo, walked up on me in the dark. And I was like looking at it, and I got good pictures of it. And then I realized later, because they're very rare, I think if I remember correctly, they say there's only like 150 or so of them in the wild now. So that's what I use predominantly, is the ATN device. And I'm getting ready to bump up and go to a FLIR camera, which is got a lot more clarity and resolution here in the near future, because one of the pitfalls with the ATN device is that the way it's wired, I call it, I haven't been a COM-ET radio guy myself as a SEAL. You got to hold that button down for like 4 seconds on it for it to kick into the film video mode. And sometimes it's just, I've had stuff where by the time I got it running in video mode, it was gone, through the summer foliage. Because, when you're out there in the woods in the night, that Columbine Hondo wilderness there, in New Mexico, down there by Cuesta, Red River, it's thick. Perfect environment for black bears, and blah, blah, blah. But so I've found myself with that device several times, catching a glimpse of something, that I saw, and I just snapped the pictures of it. And then, just through trial and error, I got to the point where I just kept snapping pictures. I figured I'd get a bunch of stills, and it worked, because I've got some stuff that I'm going to put out and present in my presentation at the conference in May here in Broomfield, where you can see the stills that I took. You can see the Sasquatch, moving, the progression of its movement. So that's what I predominantly use for those devices, and they work pretty good, but I still want something clear. So as soon as I get the money, I'm going to bump up to a FLIR camera, because they're clear. They got better resolution.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Billy, you want to go ahead and do the halfway?
Yep, I can do that. So Dan, you remember I asked you about music.
Oh yeah.
So Dan likes the 80s, kind of like the 80s pop music.
Yeah.
So I did my best. Okay.
Well, that's good.
So let's see what you think about this.
Do we get Cyndi Lauper?
No, I wasn't able to get her, but we'll see what you think here.
Can you touch a Navy SEAL strong in the woods when myths belong? Searching shadows, but it keeps the song. Hunting Bigfoot all day long. Bigfoot's out there hiding still. Toth's got courage, iron will. Through the forest, climbs the hill. On this quest, he won't stand still. Nightfall comes, the forest speaks. Eyes like fire, they start to bleed. Toth's on edge, but never weak. In the dark, the truth he sees. He's the president on the trail. Bigfoot group's got plans to nail. His mission never gonna fail. Through the wild he sets his sail. When Bigfoot's out there hiding still, Toth's got courage, iron will. Through the forest, climbs the hill. On this quest, he won't stand still. He's the president on the trail. Bigfoot group's got plans to nail. His mission never gonna fail. Through the wild he sets his sail. Yeah! makes his stand, with each step feels the command.
There we have it.
That's
That
all
is, hey, did you write that, Gary?
right.
That was great. Thank you very much.
You
It's pretty
I think
moving and
Pink may have a
inspiring.
new theme song there.
No, it is. I'll definitely use that in the future. It was
I'll
like-
send it. I'll send it to you on by your email.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. I love it. Thank you. It's pretty moving. It's pretty inspirational, that's for sure. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dan, I'm gonna get right back into it here.
Yeah, sure.
Now, everybody knows, you know, when you go on the internet, you get a lot of stuff. Some of it is factual, some of it not so much.
Right.
Now, I'm not asking for information. I'm not asking if you know anybody that did this or whatever. But when you go on to Navy SEALs and Bigfoot, the internet is flooded with stories of U.S. Navy SEALs hunting down a family of aggressive Sasquatch in western North Carolina. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said earlier, I don't know anything about that. I mean, being retired and having served in the teams and, you know, doing everything I've done over the years, I mean, I've never heard of any, you know, type of, I guess I could say, operation of that sort being conducted by anybody in the Naval Special Warfare community. And I don't know if I'd really, you know, lead any credence to it. But then again, I'm not sure because, like I said, I've never heard of anything about that. And I would actually think personally, with my background in the years that I was in the organization, which I love dearly, I probably would have heard about it from someone, you know, because with my background, like a lot of other guys in the teams, you know, sometimes you just get together and start talking, you know, whether it's just scuttlebutt or, you know, it's professionally at work around the water cooler, as they say. And I've never heard of any team guys going out and hunting for Bigfoot and, you know, whatever. I mean, I've heard other stories, military related, and, you know, but, you know, like the Mount St. Helens eruption where the Army guys allegedly saw a couple of them in a Army hospital tent out there, or National Guard guys, whatever it was years ago. But as far as actually hunting them down in that respect, I've never heard anything about it personally. And I could be wrong because, I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't know everything. And it's like the FBI or the CIA, they're huge organizations. And, you know, I don't know what guys are doing out in LA at the field office if I'm in Atlanta.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's my take on it personally. So
Man, I'm just going to hop in here. I'm going to say this. You have made my entire week with one word.
What's it?
I haven't heard that in a long time. Scuttlebutt.
Yes, scuttlebutt. That's a good one. Yep.
Oh my God.
Yes, scuttlebutt.
You talk about taking somebody back right there.
Yeah, that's from back in the day.
I've used that word and people look at me like I'm, you know, all smoked up or something. What?
Yeah.
What's scuttlebutt?
Skylarking. Remember skylarking?
Gedunk, that's another one.
Yeah, Guidon. Comshaw.
Yeah.
Anybody from back then knows what Comshaw is. That was a great one there. Yeah.
But my next question is weird. I ask all the guests this, and I'm going to explain it as I go. Okay?
Yep.
The question is animal, mineral, or vegetable? Animal, do you think that Bigfoot is a physical living animal? Mineral, do you think that Bigfoot might be extraterrestrial or interdimensional? Or vegetable, do you think that it might be spiritual? Or do you think it might be any combination of all three of them?
Well, I'll have to say, because I stay pretty grounded, if you will, and I'd say it's an animal, and I think that with the other two venues or categories, I think that a lot of people, which is normal, have had a propensity to associate in some form or fashion, this whole Bigfoot Sasquatch enigma, with those two categories, if you will. And that's fine, because I mean, like, we know that like a Native American culture, from what I've learned studying and reading books, and they took Sasquatch and associated Sasquatch as a spiritual being of some sort. And there's been a lot of cultures throughout history that took animals and turned them into a deity and worshiped them as a deity, et cetera, et cetera. So, and with the UFO thing, interdimensional, I don't think, personally, I don't believe that. I'd have to see, like watching a rerun of Star Trek, Captain Kirk and Bones and
Beam me up.
Spock, all of a sudden in your bedroom, you hear that jingle sound and you see the little lights, and all of a sudden they're standing there. If I saw something like that, I'd be like, well, I guess I was wrong, but I don't know about the UFO interdimensional thing. So I think they're strictly animals, and they're very elusive, and everybody knows the story on them. And I think that all the other stuff, there is any type of association, with those venues of interdimensional or spiritual, it's like a lot of other things like that. We actually, like there's a UFO that lands on the lawn of the White House, and they come out and go, hey, let's go to Burger King. I don't know. It's like, you just, there's a lot of things you just don't know about. But for me personally, I believe it's an animal, and we don't really know what kind of animal it is per se. And with their, behavioral patterns and their nature that we know of, from what people have described. And I was just talking to Dr. Meldrum about that a couple hours ago on the phone, about some of their behavior and their intelligence levels. So, it's like anything else. We're not going to know until we finally get one. And I like to refer to personally, if anyone's familiar with it, it was what, 70 something years ago now, almost, I think. But there was that incident off Madagascar where the fishermen pulled in the coelacanth fish.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but when I saw that years ago in the news, I just sat there and I thought to myself, okay, this fish was supposed to have been extinct a long, long time ago. I don't remember the exact amount of years, but here we are, I think it was 50 something, maybe 56, around when I was born. But they reeled this fish in, a coelacanth, these fishermen off the coast of Madagascar, and it was supposed to have been extinct. So, the ocean's big, the woods are big out there, and, I'm convinced that they're out there. I don't know if there's that, like some people have said, I don't know if there's that as many as they estimate there are, but I know they're out there. I mean, it's like me. I've been out in the boondocks for years, for what, 50, 60 years of my life, hunting, hiking, camping, being a SEAL. I didn't even see a moose in the wild until just a few years ago, out by Rollinsville here, west of Denver, by the Rollinsville east portal of the train that goes through over to Winter Park. Finally spotted one hiking with a friend of mine, Rick Beard. He's a volunteer member of our staff. And I thought to myself, it took 45, 50 years to see a moose in the wild. There was Bullwinkle standing about 30 feet away by this tree. So, yeah, that's my take on that. I think they're totally, in what I know right now, I'd classify them personally as an animal. Yeah.
I'm stuck between hominid and hominid. It's either like a relic population of some type of primitive human, or it's a relic population of some kind of great ape of some sort. All humans actually fall into the hominid, as long as, chimpanzees, gorillas, and things like that, orangutans.
Right.
Like that. But the hominid is the human species. And I think, I'm stuck between them two. It's either some type of primitive human, or it's some type of, giant ape.
Yeah, I've discussed that with Dr. Meldrum too, and his take on it. And of course, with his background and his knowledge, I lean toward the primate. I mean, we don't really know. I mean, but there's been alleged samples of DNA
Mhm.
that I don't really get that deep into that were supposedly be samples that were like 97% primate, 3% human, et cetera, that were allegedly taken from various locations out in the Sierras of California, I believe, from
Yeah.
water sources,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I would lean toward, what Dr. Meldrum says, I'd lean more toward primate. Yeah.
And mention the Native Americans. I'm Cherokee and Shawnee and Scottish.
Mhm. Wow,
And
that's a good combo.
yeah, yeah, they make good Marines.
That's
But
good.
anyway, there's a lot of Shawnee stories and a lot of Cherokee stories, both about
Right,
Sasquatch taking females and breeding with them.
right.
So that kind of lends a little bit of credence to that. We've got our first guest question. I'm gonna go ahead and cue this one up, Billy.
Oh, here. Let me play the little thing here. Hold on. Here we go.
Love that. Dan, this is from George Garcia. Dan, do you believe in other cryptids?
I don't really personally, with my background and what I'm doing, I've kind of focused all my research and attention on Sasquatch and Bigfoot. So I don't really follow it that much. So I'm not really that knowledgeable of it, to be honest with you, as far as other cryptids are concerned. But I do know one thing. There's been several times in my life, including last summer, in the Columbine area there, Hans Peak area, Clark, Colorado, where I got some pictures that I'm going to show of things in the trees where I saw eye shine. And I took pictures of them from the road. And I'm just going to be blunt and honest, excuse my French, but I have no doubt. I heard one of them moving. I don't know what the hell it was. I've got a picture of it that I'm going to, display at the conference in May when we have it, May 24th in Broomfield. So there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm still convinced it's a big world. It's a big ocean, and there's probably stuff out there I would assume that we don't even know about. But as far as other cryptids go, I don't really follow it that much. My focus is primarily on, proving, irrefutably sooner or later that Sasquatch and Bigfoot do exist with some really good hardline tangible evidence, if you will. So that's my answer to that personally, professionally.
Mick, and I'm going to try to sneak some more questions in here. Dan, would you be afraid to meet Sasquatch face to face, or do you have a different perspective that doesn't allow for fear of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll tell you the truth. I'm speaking professionally, and plus from what I have experienced in the last couple of years, I know for a fact I've had one pretty close to me in Red River area of New Mexico down there. And the one that I photographed wasn't that far away from me near Columbine, Colorado. Not only that, but the one in Columbine, when I first started the research out there, I was with my girlfriend, and it was like about 11:30 at night, and she heard it moving, and we heard a tree knocking, and it was pretty close. And when checking out this mud puddle on the side of this road that goes out to Summit Creek, I think it was about 11:30 at night or so, and I was looking for footprints at the mud puddle, and heard the tree knock, and I couldn't believe how loud and strong it was and how close it was. And just to be honest with you too, just for safety's sake, I carry a 44 Magnum in a shoulder holster, when I'm out there walking around. And I walked to the other side of the truck to get behind the truck, and she had the window up partial, but she said she heard it. But I walked around the truck because I remember the first thing standing by that mud puddle when I heard the tree knock was, I don't want this overgrown lug to throw something at me.
Yeah.
Because I know that they've been known to throw. So I got behind the other side of the truck, and that's when she looked at me. She was on the driver's side, and she said, "I hear it." And I said, and the wind kind of picked up a little bit, but we heard a tree knock, I think 3 times, and there was nobody out there. I mean, we're out. It was dark, moonless night, and we went down the road and came back because I thought maybe we'll get lucky. And in the truck, we came back. Get lucky and it'll step out on the side of the road and we'll see it in the headlights or something. But when we got back to that point at the mud puddle, I heard a tree knock one more time, and it was in the distance. And I remember standing there in the dark when I got out of the truck. I thought, how in the hell could that thing move that far away that fast? Because we just went up the road and turned around and came back, and that thing had. And I knew that was not a person moving that far away, unless, and then I thought, well, maybe it might be another one responding to it, but there was no response. But the 2 times that especially the one in New Mexico, when he walked up to me on the hillside by what they call the pump house there by the Chevron mine, I got a picture of his torso and his armpits and his crotch. But, when you're looking through that ATN night vision device at night, you kind of get tunnel vision, you don't really see what's going on around you peripherally, which I really don't like, being a former SEAL, because, a lot of people that have served in special forces and in the military know that when you're out at night, your eyes or your ears or your eyes, excuse me. And I was listening, and when I heard the thing moving, I started looking around. And boom, all of a sudden there it was. And I was like, holy crap. And I snapped a couple of pictures of it, but it turned and went up the hillside real quick. As far as coming face to face with one personally, I feel that they're not dangerous. I don't think that if you ever had a choice encounter face to face with one, I have a gut feeling that most animals that I interact with, animals are like people. They have a sixth sense, and I think that a lot of animals, when they're around certain people, they know that they're not a threat and they get comfortable with them. Because in the vicinity of my girlfriend's place, there was a doe that had 2 fawns, and I got to the point where I'd go out in the yard at night, where we lived, and the mom was just bedding down with the 2 fawns right there. Fox came up to me and elk came up to me one night, in the dark. So I don't really think they're dangerous. And I think that, like most animals, they're going to protect their young or do something to protect themselves if they come across people that maybe freak out and get nervous. Because, like I came face to face with a mountain lion once hiking up Rocky Mountain National Park years ago, and it was laying on a rock, like just lounging like they do, laying on their side, like looking at me and it wasn't that far away, but I just walked by it. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I have a propensity to look at animals when they get close to me, and I'll just say, hey, what are you doing? What's up? How's it going? I just get comfortable with them because, I don't, when you do that, I don't think they get, what do you call it, lit. I don't think they get spooked, and I don't think they feel antsy, with a bad interaction between people. So like a lot of people that have had good interactions with wild animals, especially wildlife advocates, I think a lot of people have learned out there that if you're calm, cool, and collected, and you maintain your composure, you're not going to spark an incident or an adverse confrontation. And that's how I feel about Bigfoot. I don't think they're dangerous. And I think that some people have actually had a propensity to demonize them to a degree. That's my opinion. And there's also, like any other enigma of this sort, and I'm not saying this derogatorily or to be insulting, but human nature is to sometimes sensationalize things. And I know that Bigfoot and Sasquatch have been sensationalized, and that's normal. People do that with wolves. They came up with the wolf man. I mean, there's been all types of fables where animals were made to be some type of demon or some type of evil entity or spiritual threat or whatever. And that's fine, good and dandy. And, for all we know, like I said, we don't know everything. I mean, I think we're foolish to think that we do. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on out there that I'm open to, in the normal world, the physical world and the spiritual world. And I think that it's just stuff that people don't know about. And we have a God-given propensity to use our imaginations at times, which can be good and bad. It can be good, it can be bad, but that's just human nature, and that's fine because, like people want to have a Bigfoot festival and celebrate Bigfoot and have fun with it. I don't see any problem with that. That's their prerogative. And if they're enjoying it and having fun with it, then, then so be it. Take it and run with it, and have a good time. So
Yeah.
really, I don't think that they're dangerous, and I wouldn't be afraid from what I've seen, especially in the Bobcat Pass incident of October 23, when that thing let out those 3 night screams, and I finally picked it up on my thermal imaging device, and I saw it standing there. I knew, I thought, if this thing wanted to cross this meadow or this field, he could probably be on top of me in no time. But, as you can see in the video, if we watch it, pretty much all he did was stand there and look at me, from a distance. So I don't
know if I have the right one. Is that the one called Bigfoot elk herd?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That is it?
Yeah.
Hold
And if you show
it.
Yeah, if you show it, if you want to show it. But yeah, to answer this question, I'm being wired the way I am, from knowing what I know in my experience, and personally, I wouldn't be afraid to have an encounter with one face to face, because I really don't think they're going to hurt you. I think they're just as curious about us as we are them, and vice versa.
Here's that video you're talking about. I'll go ahead and put it up here.
Can you hear me if I narrate going through this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. Well, this happened in October 20th of 2023, about 1:30 in the morning. The video starts out. I'm at Bobcat Pass. This is when the first scream let out, and I mean, it was a night scream, and you can see the elk freezing and looking around, and like echo from gunshots. You think it came from the left, and that's why I panned left. Then the second scream is now, and I thought it came from the right. Like I said, gunshot, and that's a bear. And I thought, no, that's what the heck. And then there's another elk. And then the third one came right now, and then I realized he's right in front of me. And
right there.
Yeah, there he is. You can see his huge head. He's looking at me, and when you zoom in on that, he's turning his head, and he's looking at, you can see his pointed skull and his jaw, and that white part coming down, the hook there to the left, that's his actual torso, at his clavicle and his chest and his arm and his abs and the side of his lats going down to his waist. He's filling up a gap with his torso between these openings in this huge pine tree that I went to the next day and looked at. And that all of that white coming down, that's his area from here. And you could see his pointed head. And last year at the conference, I did a review of that, and I had a picture or two that I got of a gorilla. And you can see when the gorilla is facing you, his head looks kind of round, but when they turn sideways, you see that pronounced point that they have. That's a trait of their skull and anatomy. So, when I sat there that night, and after I saw that, it's like, I was looking around me too, because I heard stuff moving, and I turned off the camera because, being that close to a herd of elk, still got to be kind of safe. And then, there's a mountain lion in the area that, 2 months later, I went back to the same spot thinking that I'd get lucky. And the elk were a little bit farther over to the left that night. And that was in December. And I actually had a mountain lion cross the meadow and come up on me. And he was off to my right. So I was like, wow, I got to watch what I'm doing out here, because I don't want, an overgrown pussycat walking up in the dark.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the explanation of that one. And like I said, I mean, if you could have heard that thing, I really kicked myself to this day that I didn't get the audio on it. But you can see it standing there, and I even thought initially that it might have been a mountain lion in a tree, but I thought no, because when you get the perspective and the size of it, just going, from that elk or deer, and when you finally hit it, you could see how big its head was. And there's nothing out there that's got a silhouette or an outline like that. You know what I mean? And when I went to the spot and checked it the next day, that thing was probably at about 8, 9 feet tall. And there was a gap up there in those evergreens where you could see its head. And then the leaves or the pine needles and the vegetation of the trees came down, from the limbs and the branches, and they made that curved area, and he was filling that in, that white area where it's curved. That's actually his size and girth, filling that gap in, from like here, shoulder down. And I thought, oh my God, there's no bear or nothing out here that's going to fill that gap in like that thing did standing there that night. So with everything, looking at it and analyzing it and hearing it, I knew. And I thought, maybe I can go back to my car and get a bag of Cheetos and walk over there.
Get a zag nut. Remember, right, Gary? Zag nut.
Yeah.
Like that old commercial we had growing up. Remember that commercial we had growing up, make friends with Kool-Aid?
Yeah. That was from the squeaky footage, wasn't it, Billy? Did he come up and got
squeaky food.
Well, no, it was.
Yeah, there's a. Have you ever heard that story, Dan? As a guy, he was in North Carolina, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he was in North Carolina. He put a Zagnut bar on top of a log.
Oh, really?
And he's got one of the best thermals. I mean, you see this thing like crawl up and reach up there and get that Zagnut bar. It ain't a bear. It's not I'm telling you.
Hand. You can see the hand reach up and get the Zagnut and pull it off.
Wow, really? So it crawled? It was crawling?
It started off standing. If you watch the entire video, it's called the squeak.
Wow.
But if you watch the entire video, you can see it walking in. And once it gets to one point, and
Right.
I'm going to revert back to my old military self, he drops and crawls. He does.
And I believe it because
all the way
the
up
first
to it.
time, I believe it because the first time at Red River that I had I call it my first incident in what was it, September of 23. We were down by the Columbine, the pump house there on that road going between Cuesta and Red River. I actually caught an odor. Yeah, I remember. And, I know I've heard a lot of stories, skunkish odor or mildewy or whatever. And I caught a whiff of something and I started looking around and I put my camera up. And actually that Red River that runs through that, I guess you call it valley there, going from Cuesta on Route 39 to Red River, from Cuesta to Red River. Some of those portions of the river that you can access right from the roadway, it's not that far away, but it has a drop and a dip, down into it. And I caught it. I'm pretty sure it was looking up at me and I saw it and I snapped a picture and caught it real quick. But later on, when I looked at it, you could see it's, front head with the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And I thought, wow. And it was hard to hear because I was near the creek and it was running pretty good. So the water was making some pretty good noise, which is, anybody who's been in special forces and stuff out there knows that water, and rain and wind can cover up, sounds and noise from movement. But I caught that one picture and I thought, wow. And I went down there, and, I couldn't see anything. And I thought, I don't know which way it went. So, like I said, sometimes when I'm out there, I'm pretty cautious because I've had several occasions where, like wolf, fox, other animals, mountain lion have, been approaching me and you're sitting there going like this. And all of a sudden you look over, there's an animal, about 30, 40, 50 feet away. And you're like going, holy crap. Nice mountain lion, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So
that's the only thing I hate about those things. If you're out there with night vision or whatever, and You know,
Yeah.
you really caught, like you said, you get that tunnel vision, and then you
Yeah.
take it off and you can't see nothing.
Yeah, one night last year I was at Red River, and I got videos of all this stuff and pictures. I was standing there on the road at this area where Eric, one of our witnesses, had said that he had his sightings and his incidents. And man, I'm looking down the road, and all of a sudden I look down right at my feet. There's a fox.
Yeah.
This fox came out of nowhere from across the highway where I was standing, because I move around at night and check out different areas, you know. And I look down, there's a fox, and it's sitting there looking at me like, what, 5'8". I mean, you know, maybe some people don't understand it, or, you know, some people do, but for me, you know, to get that close to wildlife is pretty cool, especially in the dark. And I've never felt threatened. And like, to answer his question from a while ago, I really don't think they're dangerous. I think they're very docile creatures. And in my personal opinion, you know, from what I've seen in my experience in just 2 years, I really think that they were just, you know, standing there looking at me, going, maybe thinking, what's this knucklehead doing out here at 2 o'clock in the morning? I don't know.
Exactly.
You know, but, you know, I mean, yeah, I don't know. But, you know, the thing is, I really don't feel they're dangerous. I don't at all. And I wouldn't hurt me or bother me one bit, you know, to come face to face with one, because I've already got a plan for that if it happens. You know what I mean? I've already got, what do you call it? Some SOPs laid out, you know, for a good, medium, middle of the road, and then, you know, when you know what hits the fan situation.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, anybody that's been in the military knows about a primary, secondary, and a
Yeah.
tertiary, you know, plan or a course of action or an SOP. So I've got all that laid out.
Plan D, that's when it's really bad, Jack.
You what?
You get down to Plan D, that's when the stuff is really bad.
Oh yeah, when you get down to Plan Delta, yeah, 2 is 1 and 1 is none.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. Yeah, you remember that. But yeah. So
I'd like to hop in here and say thank you, S.C. Willis. That was the Lake Michael Green, and he filmed Squeaky in the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina.
Yeah.
The Lake Michael Green. And I'm a firm believer that is an excellent video. And I don't think that that's a human. I don't think there's any way that's a human.
Yeah.
Dan, I watched a video. I think it was probably Friday evening, maybe Thursday. And this video was that they had asked AI how many Navy SEALs it would take to subdue Bigfoot. Now, I don't mean kill Bigfoot, just to subdue Bigfoot.
right.
They said it would take a squad of 6 SEALs to subdue Bigfoot. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think. I mean, you know, I'm getting ready to put my phaser on stun. I don't think 6 guys, even SEALs, could bring one of them down.
No,
I mean, physically,
so.
I mean, with the size of some of them, and I mean, the one I saw at Bobcat Pass that you just saw in the video, I mean, like, you know, like, that's one of the reasons why I named Big, because I think just about every personal recount or account story, you know, written, oral, radio, video, from people, they always say, I can't believe how big it was, or you wouldn't believe how big it was.
Yeah.
Or man, that freaking thing was big. And that's where I got the idea to come up with, you know, Bigfoot Investigative Group, because I've seen so many people, and I think that with the size of these things, I mean, you know, between the variation between the male and the female sex dimorphism, all that stuff, won't go into the scientific aspect of it, but, you know, there is a variation between the size of the males and the females, like most mammals, you know, and bears and mountain lions and elk and other animals. But I mean, when you got something that's allegedly estimated at what, 8 feet tall, maybe a male that can weigh up over 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, and the females are what, 6 to 7 feet, probably weighing at 650 or so. I mean, and you know, another thing too, it's like, I don't know about you, but I've often thought You know, if they ever got in a jam, this is because I don't know if you ever heard, I think it was the Twain, they call it Twain Heart, California. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so, yeah.
There was a video years ago of a couple in their camper broke down on the side of the road, and they recorded, you know, all this stuff going on outside that night. And it sounded to me, after going over it numerous times, listening to it, you can find it on YouTube and stuff, that it sounded like it was a couple of Sasquatch that were being harassed or hunted by dogs. And that's what I thought. But I remember listening to that, and I thought, if you did piss off an animal this big, being blunt about it, and, you know, with their strength, I mean, what would happen if they decided to go over, you know, a good sized tree limb and just break it off and, you know, start using it as a weapon, which, you know, I mean, if you ever saw the Hulk movie, the first one, when the dogs attacked him, I think he pulled the tree limb off, broke it, and stripped it with it. I mean, I'm not saying that, but, you know, something on those lines. I'm thinking, I don't want something that's 8 foot tall and weighs 1,200 pounds, you know, swinging a log at me or a limb or at me or something, using it for a weapon. And plus, not only that, with their strength and their height and their size, I mean, I don't know. I just can't see that happening personally.
Well, here's the funny thing about that, Dan. Me and Gary are aware of a story of a guy in Chilhowie, Virginia, that went messing around in the woods, and he found some type of a shelter. He went in it and was messing around in it. And when he came out, the story is he went down by this creek and he saw this fresh stack of rocks that had just been taken out of the creek. They still had water dripping off of them.
Wow.
And when he came out of there, he saw this thing standing in front of him, took off running, and as he was running, he would look back, and he said the thing had a limb, and it swung right over top of his head.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, limited intelligence, but still, I think that an animal of that sort, you know, could resort to, you know, using some type of device of that sort, you know, raw material, you know, limb. I don't see any. I mean, because we know that we've heard stories too about them throwing rocks and stuff, you know, and other objects at people. So, you know, I mean, I know I was in Iran once, hiking the Zagros Mountains 20-something years ago, and I had a couple of wild dogs attack me or come after me in this gully I was in, and, you know, I was by a stream bed, and I just started picking up smooth rocks and throwing it at them, and I hit them a few times with it, and, you know, it was enough to run them off. You know, a couple of them, 2 of them were yelping, but, you know, it doesn't take much to bend down and pick something up or grab something and start using it for a weapon. And I would think that an animal of that size, plus, you know, being familiar with their environment, like most people are living off the land, I think that they would have a propensity to, you know, under certain circumstances, resort to doing that. I mean, people do it. People do it. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Another thing I want to get into here is there are lots of sightings on military bases. And I'm just going to be honest, I've heard a lot of sightings from, you know, I'm going to use my own personal experience as a Marine, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I've heard a lot of sightings come out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I've heard a lot of sightings come out of Camp Pendleton, Nick, if you're still listening. I've heard a lot of sightings coming out there. And I'm just going to be honest, I think a lot of it is that these military bases are huge. You really don't know how big till you get there. They are huge.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Sasquatch on military bases?
Well, I know for a fact, like when I was on active duty, I loved doing it too. It was one of my favorite things to do training wise. When I go up to Fort Lewis, Washington a lot to do E&E training. And as I met up there before, and they had told me that they'd seen them when they were out, you know, in their vehicles at night, you know, i.e. using the term playing war games or doing maneuvers. And I'm like going, you know, because a lot of military bases like Fort Lewis up there by Tacoma, you know, it's in the Northwoods, as we call it. And so, you know, it's perfect habitat for them. And plus, that's a place they've been sighted, You know, like I said, it's perfect habitat for them. So, you know, I think that some of the stuff on the military bases and the sightings are just natural, fortuitous events that occur where, you know, people were in the right place at the right time. And like Professor Meldrum had explained to me once about moving, because, you know, with the increase that I see as a researcher in the last couple of decades, if you look at some of the Sasquatch maps, like on BFRO, this is a theory of mine, but from the northern parts of, you know, the northwestern Americas, there's a line of sightings that, you know, up there around Utah and through that area down into, you know, the area of Texas, I think it is. I don't have my map in front of me, but I was looking at that once and I thought to myself, you know, there's a string of sightings here that's making a line from here in the northwest down here into the Oklahoma area. And these lines, it was trickled. And I'm wondering, I wonder if those were sightings that people just made. Like Professor Meldrum said, they could have been solo moving from point A to point B, transiting. And I thought maybe that's a corridor that they're using, you know, from that area to here, because there is a string of sightings that make up that area. So I think that, you know, like other animals, I mean, I've been on tons of military reservations and I've seen coyotes. I've been out and seen elk and deer and bear and mountain lions. I mean, they still do. They use the Mount Laguna area west of San Diego, out by Julian and Alpine, for training Navy SEAL buds, trainees, and other people on the compass course. They still do a, you know, good old fashioned compass course out there. And, you know, there's been mountain lion, bear, and other type of animals spotted there. So if they're on a military base, doesn't surprise me, because it's like any other animal. They're moving through the area and, you know, they're going from point A to point B. I mean, it's like, where was it? It was a couple years ago. I read in California, I followed this research project, and it was with a wolf, if I remember correctly. And they collared this wolf, like up Washington or something, I think it was. And over a period of time, until they just lost the signal from the wolf. But I looked at this map of where they were tracking the wolf. You know, where they had this collar on him, tracking him in this research project. And it was amazing to see where this daggone wolf moved and transited and, you know, walked, or whatever you want to call it, to, you know, walkabout, whatever. But he got all the way down into the Laguna Mountain areas, and the area out by Santa Rosa, out by San out in that area, you know, and San Jacinto. And then he went all the way back up north, you know, and it was amazing to see the line of this animal moving over. I don't remember how many months it was, but, you know, I'm sure Sasquatch move around like that too. And, you know, I mean, you could be out some night sitting in a field camping with your wife and look up and maybe see one going across the, you know, the field for all you know. So it doesn't surprise me if they've been spotted on. As a matter of fact, at Fort Lewis once, there was a guy that told me in the Army, he was SF years ago, this was like 1988, I think it was. Yeah, 37, that they actually filmed one, you know, because that's when everybody was starting to use NVGs a lot and all that. And they were parked on the side of a road going up to this place. I think it was Squally Creek or something like that. And they saw it come out on the road, and it stood there. It was about 150, 200 yards away. And they said you could tell right away it wasn't a person, and it went across the road. And then on that west side of Fort Lewis there, there's where the reservation ends, there's a big fence where it separates the reservation from the civilian property out there. And it's near a place called Weir Prairie. Yeah, we used to, that was Weir Prairie was a drop zone. And we jumped in there a few times at night, you know, when we started our E&E stuff, and it was spotted near there. And the guy said, and I remember looking at the guy, just to be honest with you, I said, "You're shitting me." He goes, "No." And I said, so, you know, they are, and they have been seen There's been a lot of incidents of them being seen, including at Camp Pendleton, California, back in the 60s. There's a renowned story of 4 Marines that were on maneuvers that saw one. And, and even my friend Steve out in California, he lives in the Ramona area. He's a new member volunteer at Big. They had some sightings out there, last summer by a young boy on a motorcycle, which I'm probably going to go out and look into that here in the next few months. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me because it's like any other animal. They're going to be moving around, and who knows where they're going or what. See one might be your lucky day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
I'm going to explain this one a little bit to the audience first, because there's probably not a whole lot of people that's heard of this. And I can remember this from way back in the day when I was in the Marines and training and things like that. And this is a big, big rule that the Navy SEALs use. And it's called a 60-40 rule. And when you use the 60-40 rule, when you reach like your breaking point, you have to convince yourself that your body has only used 40% of your energy. You still have 60% to go. Now that's the 60-40 rule. So when you reach your breaking point, you've only used 40%. You've got 60% in reserve. Do you use that in your investigations?
No, I don't anymore, because when I go out at night, I make it a habit where I always try to start, depending upon the time of the year that it's at, like daylight savings time or not daylight savings time. But in the winter, I'll start around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I make it a rule to stay out till at least 2 to 3. And there's been a couple of times at Bobcat Pass where I stayed out till like 4 a.m. because I thought I was onto something. And I don't use that anymore because I really don't put myself personally, at this point in my life, believe it or not. I just last month, which I can't believe. My mother said I'd never live to be 18. Fancy that, right? So I beat her by 50 years. But no, I take it pretty easy anymore. And I gauge all of my work, which is all at night. I mean, I'll do day work where like I'll go look at the snow, but with the 60-40 rule, I don't really have any, I don't really apply it anymore or think about it, because I keep myself in a nominal, place where I really don't, get that tired or to push myself to that. Now, if I had one chasing me with a 2x4,
then it might apply.
It's like
I'm gonna be honest with you. When that adrenaline kicks in, Jack.
Yeah.
I got shot at by a sniper when we were in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
He missed me by about 1 step. The bullet landed right in front of my foot. Okay,
Right.
and then after the bullet hit, I'm like, what was that? And then you can hear the report of the rifle. And son, I'm here to tell you what, I'd have give Usain Bolt a run for his money as I was moving back towards that Humvee.
Yeah, you were lucky because I was a sniper, and you should have yelled back at him, "Your dope sucks."
Yeah. Actually, I have a theory on it, because that happened
Should
after
have
I
yelled
got
back
blown
and
up.
said, "Hey, pal, your dope's way off." You know what I mean?
I think my
You
gait
should have
was
said.
my gait was pretty odd because, like I said,
Yeah.
I just had that incident where the mortar head went off,
Yeah,
and I think I was walking a little weird,
right.
and
No, I mean,
that's why he missed me.
no, adrenaline's a powerful thing, especially when you're getting shot at.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's like, especially in combat, it's like, I don't know, it's really kind of hard to explain it. But I did learn one thing about adrenaline: it still won't get you fast enough to outrun a bullet.
And once that stuff is done, that is it. You're done.
And I'm not.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of veterans out there. I'm not treating that with any levity, but we used to say that I don't care how fast you are, you're not going to outrun a bullet.
Yeah.
That's just that was some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, where doing what we did and what we do, and all the men and women that are out there now in the military, and when what hits the fan, your real world, I don't care who you are, the adrenaline gets going. And that's why we train the way we do, is because you've got that composure, and you know what the hell to do when it happens. But going out at night like I do now, I make it a point to just sit, and I usually pick 3 places or spots a night, and usually they're by a road or by a lake or a creek or a stream, because I learned a long time ago that you can spot them there, or you might get lucky and, on the soft mud, sand, or, terra firma around those bodies of water, you might get lucky and get some good footprints. But I have no problem still staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and sitting out there at night. Because to be honest with you, I get pumped.
Oh yeah.
I get pumped because I'm in my element, and I sat in the dark for days and hours before. You know what it's like, and it doesn't bother me. And I just figure, okay, maybe tonight's it. And, I just go through it. And then I've got enough reserve and enough in me still, like they say, how's that old cliche? You still got some left in your tank.
Right.
I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I retired in May of 99. It's hard to believe it'll be 26 years ago already this May. And I pride myself at looking back on my career as a SEAL, serving with those guys and everybody in the military, it was an honor. But also I look back and I thank God for the physical and the mental ability that he gave me. I mean, because, I could run like a deer, as people have said. And, I had this thing in me that I got it growing up, with all those guys on my paper route at Little Creek when I was a kid. And, I led by example. Everything I did was, I tried to set a good example. And now, at this point in life, doing what I'm doing, I'm grateful. And I thank God that I can go out there and, from sunset to almost sunrise and do what I'm doing, because there's been a few times, like with the sighting at the pump house, I got out of the car and I said, the hell with it. I checked my Model 29, just walked in the woods and sat by a tree and sat there. And, it can get hairy, but, at the same token, doing what you've done as a SEAL, I mean, like, good grief, anybody that's ever done an E&E course in the teams at Fort Lewis, Washington, getting from point A to point B in a 2 or 3 period, whatever it might be, a squad or a platoon in the dark, but by yourself. So you just do it, it's inherent. And I think that's the case with most people that have served in the military, guys that have been out there, men and women alike, that have been there on an op at night, they know what it's like. So that's my take on that.
Yep.
I know, Billy, we went way over, and I'm sorry.
Nope, that's fine. I'd already told Dan to kind of expect that.
Oh yeah. No,
one thing I want to get into before we go, okay, is on your website. I'm gonna give a shameless plug for you right here. It's the Bigfoot Investigative Group.
Yep.
They have a website. People go on there and check that out and look at these videos and look at some of these pictures. I want to talk about the File 2A photos that you have.
Okay.
I'm going to be 100% honest, okay? A lot of people will, I think it's called anthropomorphize, where they see faces and things like that in the dark that aren't there.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really skeptical when I look at photos and things like that, because inherently in your Bigfoot research, you have to be.
Right.
So when I'm looking at somebody else's photos or whatever, I really break them down and I look at them and I'm thinking, okay, you got this here and you got that there. And okay, I really don't see any shape to it. This is probably just a stump squatch or whatever. I looked at photos that you have of File 2A. And in one of them, you talk about an eye. And I am not going to drink the Kool-Aid. And I read that when I first looked at the photo. I was like, I don't see no daggone eye in that thing. And I kind of pulled in close to and I was like, right there it is, dude. You can see the white and everything.
No, yeah, that's
a phenomenal photo.
Well, that's why I was saying earlier, if you remember, I made the remark that there were a few things that I caught, walking down the road and driving down the road. I got like eye shine, and some of it was up in the trees, some of it was, and what had happened was on that picture and a couple others, I got to the point where I was kind of frustrated because I thought the only way I'm going to catch this is hopefully get out of the truck or just point my phone that way and start, hitting the button to take as many pictures, like freeze frame, as I could. And that's what I did. And that night when that incident occurred, another thing I want to make everybody very clear about and expound on is the fact that these incidents, like I was saying earlier about special forces people, whoever, were trained to use our ears in the dark or our eyes. And I heard movement. I've been out there all my life, and it's like you're geared to that. And when I caught that object that night, I didn't even get it until I got back home at like 2 or 3 a.m. And then I, go up and boil a pot of water and get a cup of tea and start looking at my phone with the pictures. And when I enlarged it and I saw the eye, and then you can see the head. And I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. There's some things that we don't know about, perhaps. And that was something that I took a picture of. And I thought, what the hell is that? And like, there's another picture that I'm going to divulge or, show everybody at the conference in May. And this one was crazy because I was out there by myself and I heard this thing moving in the trees. And at first, when I heard it off to my left, I was standing on the edge of the road, got out of my car, and I actually thought it was maybe a mountain lion up in the tree, the way because it sounded like it was moving. Because, you can tell something that's bipedal, the difference between something walking on 4 legs and 2, and et cetera. When this thing was moving up in the branches, and I was standing there, and I thought, what the hell? And so I just pointed that way, and I, started, real quick with my cell phone camera. And sure enough, I got home. And I'll tell you real quick, if people come to the conference in Broomfield, Colorado, May 24th, you'll see it. But I caught an image of this thing in the tree. And when you see its face, it's like hanging onto the tree, and then there's a trunk, and it's like looking around at like this. And when I saw it and I zoomed in on it, because another thing, I was a photo intel guy, and I did tons of photo, analysis, satellite imagery, you name it, as a SEAL. And I'm going to be honest, excuse my French, but I looked at that thing and I thought, what the hell is that? Up in the tree, because you can, I know how to look at stuff where, shadows and limbs and branches and, depth of field for vegetation and limbs come together. And this is not that. This is some type of, I'm going to call it creature or whatever, up in the damn tree. And you can see it holding on, and it's looking around the tree at me. You can see its face. You can clearly see its eyes, and it's got this hair, like, I don't know what the hell that is, but but I'm glad you saw the eye.
Yeah, I did. And I'm going to use an old Marine term for that too. Where you're talking about rapid fire, just taking pictures.
Yeah.
That's the old Marine spray and pray.
Yep. Spray and pray.
As many downrange as you can, and hope you get something.
Yeah, because like I was out at a place called Big Red back in last August or no, July, and I up there, it's just northeast of Columbine, heading up toward the Wyoming border. And I was on the side of the road, got out of the car, I was looking around, and all of a sudden I saw this thing walking. And I, just fast enough to snap a few shots of it with that ATN. I got stills of it, like freeze frame. Got home and put them all together, and you could see, like cartoon cells, you could see its movement. And there's a couple that I'm going to show in May where it comes out of the vegetation and it turns to go into the vegetation, and the silhouette of it when it's moving in the frames that I put in the slides, just saying this candidly, it's amazing because the one shot I got of it, it's almost an exact, copy of Patty's, famous look back at Willow Creek, the same with the arm out and looking back. It's the same silhouette and profile almost. And when I looked at it, I was like, wow, that's amazing. But you can see in the stills where it turns and it goes in, and, they disappear quick like other animals. I've got a couple videos where, like, I've got one of a bunch of elk over by Hans Peak Lake where I was one night. And I looked up on this hillside, and here's all these elk. And I took a sip of water, looked back up, and they were gone. They were gone. I mean, I'm like, where the hell did they go? You know, because the vegetation, especially in the summer when it's in full bloom, is so thick. Man, you know, anything, especially animals, you know, they can disappear in that stuff quick. You know, so I'm glad you saw the eye. And if you look at
Yeah,
that,
that was.
well, if you
I
look
do a
at
lot
that
of
thing,
research on it.
yeah, you
Go
can
ahead,
see
Daniel.
that it's got a pointed head, and you can see it almost gave me the impression like it was looking at me and it turned like this sideways to leave, and I caught its side of its face with its eye. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And then I was telling Jeff today on the phone, Dr. Meldrum, I caught some other pictures of it over a 3 or 4 month period from a distance in this area called Sand Mountain, and I pictures of it from a distance 2 or 3 times, maybe 4, and it's amazing because you can see in the different locations over the 3 or 4 month period in the Sand Mountain vicinity where I saw it, and I photographed it with my ATN device. It's the same creature because it gives off the same silhouette in different locations, and you'll see that in my. What really hit me, you know, knowing what I know about this whole Sasquatch enigma and the research and the knowledge I have on it over, you know, decades like everybody else. A couple of those silhouettes that it presented on the ATN imager were exact same profile of the movement of the Paul Freeman video from Walla Walla in '94. When it's moving, you can see it where it turns and it walks away and then it disappears, but it's the same on 3 different pictures. You'll see them the same exact. If you've ever seen a still of the famous Paul Freeman video, you know, where it's walking and looking at him, it's the same exact profile on all 3 or 4 of them. And those are the kinds of things, you know, when I'm seeing it move, you know, and I'm getting pictures of it, and then in the stills you can see where it moved. You know, it's not a deer, it's not an elk, it's you know, it's not a bear, and you know they're similar to other images and video that other people and you know and famous Sasquatch researchers, as I call it, you know, have you know copied and made or filmed and photographed themselves over the years. You know what I mean? So
One of the
yeah, I'm
things
glad.
I do a lot of research on our guests and stuff before we have somebody on, and
Yeah.
I work on it for days sometimes.
Yeah.
And I look at a lot of videos.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I look for, and I do a lot of research on my own on the side too.
Right.
One of the things that I look for in a moving Sasquatch video, the Sasquatch I had a sighting myself.
Good. Yeah.
And I was about 3 feet from it. I almost hit it with a vehicle, and it walked across the road in front of me. But
wow, where'd that happen at? Just curious.
about a half a mile from my house, up on the ridge above my house.
Wow.
But
Stepped out in front of you.
yeah, 100%. I almost hit it for real. I had to jack the brakes up to stop to keep from hitting it, and it walked in front of my vehicle and just went over the hill.
Right.
But when I see videos, one of the things that I look for is Sasquatch has a really distinctive gait. You go back to the Patterson-Gimlin film, you look at the Paul Freeman film, and this one's really controversial. Me and Billy talked about it a little bit the other day, is the Independence Day film.
Yeah.
When you look at
When it's
those,
carrying the baby.
yep, I look for the bent-kneed gait.
Yep.
Sasquatch has kind of a bent-kneed gait when they walk.
Right.
And I'm going to say this for all of our listeners. If you don't believe, you know, that gait is hard to replicate, bend your knees and walk for a little while and see how sore you get. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that's one of the first things when I met Professor Meldrum a year or 2 ago that I, you know, picked his brain on is their anatomy and, you know, the gait and, you know, the way they walk. Because even in the Patterson-Gimlin film and some of the stills, you can see how that area from the knee up is 90 degrees, you know, perpendicular to the surface of the ground. You know, and the sole of the foot's perpendicular, you know, or parallel perpendicular. And you're like, you know, you tried to walk like that, you'd almost just be standing in the same spot.
You
might
can
move
pick
an
yourself
inch or
up
two
off
at
the
a
floor.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's why when people say, I've read Dr. Meldrum's book, I love it. Here it is, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. I'm actually reading it again. I think I've read it 3 or 4 times. But when you go through everything at the scientific level, that he's at and that he's a, professional in and that he's worked in, you look at it and you go, I kind of wonder sometimes based on the information and the evidence, as he's emphatically said in some of his videos that he's made over the years, how can you deny the evidence? I mean, you've got footprints with dermal ridges in them and stuff. And yeah, there's been people out there that were, jerks, if you want to call them that, and did elaborate hoaxes, to maybe debunk everything or throw everybody off. But, I've seen enough already in 2 years where I can tell everybody out there, I've seen them and I know, and they're out there between. And then, even in Red River, New Mexico, I talked to the law enforcement down there. I talked to the marshal. I talked to people from the DOE about it, at the Best Western Hotel. Matter of fact, the lead that we got, first case for Big, was from Under Sheriff Jerry Hogriff of the Taos Sheriff's Department, who he used to be the sheriff. But, I was connected with him almost 2 years ago, and he told me about Eric and his girlfriend Sylvia, who were the witnesses down there. And Sylvia is actually, too, and she's had a couple sightings, which I did, discussed with him and her. So, I don't know. It's just, you can't deny. And on that note, with the way that their anatomy and their structure and everything, yeah, you can't. And if there was a person that big moving through that area in that film, walking like that, which a lot of people really don't pick up on, a human couldn't do it. We're not built to walk that way. We walk, legs straight and, the gait. And like, I've seen some footprints in the snow in Red River and in Colorado, last November. And my God, the gait through the snow, because that's in the snow in areas. And I don't know if anybody can run around. It's a human being, in a suit with a foot this big and, make, 5, 6, 7, 8-inch strides between walking and running. I mean, just ain't going to happen. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's just, I believe that we've reached a point where there are like a lot of things in life. I've become convinced of the fact that I think a lot of people are going to believe what they're going to believe about life, whether it's the known or the unknown. There's going to be skeptics, and it's like a lot of people don't believe the Bible. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus Christ and everything else. That's that's their prerogative, and that's just the way people are going to be, because there's millions or billions of us on the planet now. How are you going to get everybody to agree on one thing unanimously or collectively? It's just not heard of anymore. So, I think that they're real. The evidence is real. And, if you really look at it, with an open mind and you really accept the proof and the facts, then you've got no other course but to, go, yeah, there's something going on here, and it's even like down there and in other places, as I went there more, I got to meet some people and they opened up to me, which I really enjoyed. And I thought that was pretty much a, what do you call it? It was a good thing. It was a good happening and an occurrence where these people got to the point where, like one lady at a store in Red River, she said, yeah, my husband went hunting years ago and he never went again. Came home one night, 1:30 in the morning. He was supposed to be gone all weekend. And she said, what the heck happened? And told her the story about what they heard and saw at this lake out there in the area northeast of Red River and Bobcat Pass. And him and his buddies were hunting and they had an incident, and it changed him for life, because his wife told me he's passed away now, but she told me, she said he looked me in the eye, and I could tell when he came through the door at 1:30 in the morning that he was pretty rattled, from what had happened. And, when he told his wife this story about what happened out there, according to her, she literally told me, she said, he never went hunting again. And I was like, so, whatever. So that's
I
my
think
take
there's
on
two
that.
reactions when you have a sighting.
Yeah.
And there was a man that was in the vehicle with me when I had my sighting,
Right.
and we had completely opposite reactions. Okay, he doesn't talk about it. He don't want to talk about it. He don't want to know nothing about it. He's out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest with you. I've always believed in Bigfoot ever since I was a small kid.
Right.
And like you said, the Patterson Gimlin film and In Search of and Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds and things like that. I've always thought it was real.
Right.
And when I had my sighting, I was hooked. It
Yeah.
was worse, it's worse than methamphetamine. I was hooked.
Yeah.
And I've studied and I've studied and I've studied, and I only come up with more questions. Just when I
Yeah.
think I've got something figured out, I come up with more questions.
Well, yeah, and that's like today before we got on the air, I talked to Dr. Meldrum for about 40 minutes. And, once he gets going, because usually when I connect with him, I've got something I'm thinking about that I want to give his opinion on, consult with him and get his advice or, his professional scientific knowledge on.
Mhm.
And, I do that. So, when you're getting down to brass tacks like that, with sightings. And the thing is, a lot of people with sightings like yours, there's just too many people out there have seen them and had legitimate incidents and sightings where, I've talked to people when I was being blunt about it, where I knew that they're not telling the truth. This did not happen. And it's like, I don't associate, like I told you earlier, the Sasquatch enigma or the creature or the being with, extraterrestrials, interdimensional, or UFO. I just don't go there personally. But, like me, I've seen 7 UFOs in my life, and 5 of those times were when I was on active duty out in the middle of nowhere, where, I was taught to identify aircraft for a reason, helicopters, jets, satellites, whatever, drones. And, I saw a couple things out in the field at night in the sky, or even with my girlfriend last summer over by one of her friends' places where we were out sitting one night just east of Sand Mountain. We saw this, it was crazy. We saw this string of lights that looked like they were about a half a mile apart, and it wasn't the satellite link or nothing. And they were coming in a line through the sky where it looked like they were appearing from nowhere, and they'd go a little ways and then disappear in a straight line. And I think we sat there and watched about, I don't know, 9 or 10 of them. I remember she was sitting in the truck and she even looked at me and she goes, "That's really strange. What the heck is that?" And so, I don't know what it was. I'd never seen anything like it. You know what I mean? So, that's where I'm coming from. You know what I mean? We don't know everything that's out there. I think we have to learn to accept the facts and the proof and the truth. That's all I can say. That's where I'm at with all of this.
Yep.
I
So,
prefer to stick more to the scientific side of things,
Yeah.
because if you don't, I can't take anything away from anybody's encounter. Okay, if you have an encounter and you tell me that it just phased out or whatever,
right.
I kind of have to take you at your word at that, because you saw that and that's what your brain put together.
Yeah.
Now, what my brain's doing is I'm trying to figure out, did Sasquatch pull a Homer Simpson where he just slid back into the foliage and disappeared?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what? But, that's the way I work. I want the scientific answer for it.
That's why I stick to my guns with Dr. Meldrum and, at that tangible, legitimate, this is it level, because, and I'm really happy and blessed and fortunate to have met him, and to have the relationship, just to be able to call him up when I do and ask him a question and go, "Hey, what's the gist on this?" Or, "What do you think about that?" It leaves it at a good, sound, tangible, logical, scientific level. Because I think with stuff like this, when you want to prove it in the end, you want to prove it at a point where it's irrefutable. you're like, here it is. You can't argue with this. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at. And I agree with you 100%. And the thing is too, one of the things that's really amazed me, and I'd like to say this, on behalf of all of the people out there like you, I'm amazed at the amount of people that are out there in our country and up in Alaska and other places, doing some really heavy duty, hard hitting, boots on the ground, as they say in the military type research, and trying to get to the bottom of this. I mean, it's amazing because like when I first decided to start big, I was amazed and overwhelmed when I did my research for the name, when I saw how many organizations, like Sasquatch Watch Radio are out there, all over the country. And it's like, Jim Myers, friend of mine, he runs Sasquatch Outpost out in Bailey. Jim is a proponent of, he has a ambition or a dream, as he stated it last year at the conference, big conference, that, why can't we all get along? Why can't we share info? Why can't we work together?
It's awful when nobody can get along.
You can't get the entire Sasquatch community to agree on one thing.
Yeah.
One thing.
Right.
And it kills me. It really does.
I want to know what kind of beer they drink. I'm just joking.
They've been into the Kool-Aid, that's for sure. I'll tell you that.
I'm just drinking.
Because there's some stuff, when you do as much research on, I'm kind of a desk warrior right now because I've had both knees replaced and I've got some other medical issues going on. So I'm kind of a desk warrior right now. So I'm doing a lot of research on different things. Like one of the things is like I'm studying primitive hominid species, and the reason that I'm doing that is Dr. Meldon brought up a point that he thinks that it's possible that maybe Sasquatch might be related to some type of the robust Australopithecines, like Paranthropus, which there was two different species, Paranthropus. It was Paranthropus boisei and Paranthropus boisei and robustus. One lived in the eastern part of Africa and one lived in the southern part of Africa.
Right.
But, in my studying and things like that, what I've come up with is there have never been any Australopithecines found outside of Africa.
Right.
So if it is some type of robust Australopithecine, when did it migrate? How did it go from Africa, to wherever? So
well, that's things that mystify me and stump me, because even on those lines, you couldn't resort to the land bridge theory, from Europe or Russia to Alaska. And so I don't. And then there are theories that that the continents were connected at one time and they broke apart. So maybe they were. I look at that scene in Elf and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The ice breaks away and they start floating away on it. I don't know. I mean, that my mind just went there for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe they were here when the continents were together. And I know God knows how long it took for the continents to pull apart, when they were one supercontinent. But maybe, it's like years ago when I did, I'll throw this in there, I did research, heavy duty research on Noah's Ark. And I know that I found a story once where they found the remains of whales, mammals, whales, up in the mountains of Peru, I think it was.
Absolutely, yes.
If I remember correctly. And I'm thinking,
correct.
okay, how in the hell, with all due respects, how did two whale carcasses get all the way up in the mountains of Peru? Yeah. And, the logical, I thought right away, because I read Dr. Walt Brown's book years ago on the flood and stuff. And I thought to myself right away, okay, the water covered the earth. There was a great flood globally. And these whales swam during that flood. And they got to that area of the earth and the water receded. They got trapped up there. Just like, you can look at YouTube now and see tons of videos where people up in Alaska and other places save and rescue stranded orcas, killer whales, when they end up high and dry when the tide goes out. And I thought to myself, that's the only logical explanation
Yeah.
of how, unless we're going to call Mulder and Scully,
Yeah.
they took them out of SeaWorld and dropped them there. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
stuff like that with a rational mind, you're like, how in the hell did they get up there?
Mm-hmm.
They were there when the water, in my opinion, they
Yep.
got stuck. When the water started going
Absolutely.
down, they couldn't get back to the oceans, and they were like, oh, crap. And
Yeah.
boom, there they are. So,
Yep.
stuff like that, there's scientific evidence and proof. And, it's like I could go on and on and on, but, they're out there, and I know they're out there. And, if we're going to wrap up soon, I just want to say it's been a pleasure being here. And my big take for tonight in closing is I really want to wish everybody more than good luck, that's out there doing this, all the great organizations, all the great people, the amateurs all the way to the scientific level, because there's a lot of people out there busting their whats to get to the bottom of this. And Godspeed and more power to you, because I hope sooner or later we'll get that evidence that we need that's going to be irrefutable, where people are going to go, oh crap, they are real. And that's what we need to do, is just all of us keep plugging away at it. Sooner or later, I call it the Bigfoot lottery.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to go down in history, to be the person. Like I was in the Black Hills last summer, came to this beautiful view of this beautiful lake, in the Black Hills. And there was a highway historical marker where it told the story of, who was it? Alexander Graham Bell. Anyway, he was fishing and got the idea to invent the light bulb by some fiber that he pulled off a tree, where he started the experiments for the filament, and everything. And I remember standing there reading that historical marker thinking, wow, that's how that all began. You know what I mean? So, it's been great. I've enjoyed tonight. It's been a pleasure to be here. That's for sure.
Well, Billy, that's all
It's
I've
been
got.
great.
Dan, I really appreciate you being on. It's been a real treat to have a former service member on tonight with.
Yeah, I'm glad to meet you guys, and I look forward to working more with you in the future. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully, not just us, but someone, like I said, will hit pay dirt, here in the near future, sooner or later, and it's going to be good. I don't know what we'll do after that. I mean, if somebody
right, exactly
finds one, we're all going to be out of a job or a hobby in a way.
Yeah, we'll be out of our hobby.
But still, if it happens,
maybe we can all get jobs, working with it then.
We'll build a museum.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah, but anyway, so we're gonna wrap it up tonight. Is that it, or what?
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. If you can, can you hang on while we close out the show, and then we'll come back?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for being on tonight. By the way, we had a conversation before the show started, so we'll be inviting Dan back, or even maybe some other members of Big back, and to kind of keep us up to date on some of the research and stuff that they're doing. So I'm sure everybody will look forward to that. I've already seen some comments about, how much they've enjoyed you being here, Dan. So
good. It's been a
good
pleasure.
job.
And I hope a lot of people can get edified and enlightened and educated and a bit enthralled by this, because that's what we want to do too, is get people, maybe like there's other, what do they call it? Movements, other things that people can get active in. And, the more people we have out there active that are taking part, trying to solve it and do whatever, the better, the more the merrier.
Exactly. Yeah. So we want to thank everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be here next Monday night. We're going to have probably one of Mick's favorites on. Steve Coles is going to be on talking about his new books that he's got coming out. So we'll have him on next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Again, just hold on, Dan, while we close out. We'll be back. And everybody have a great rest of the week, and we will see you all next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank